Hello, ladies. I hope you had a great shift. Hopefully, nothing too chaotic, but even if you did, this is perfect time for yoga. So video one is just going to be a little bit of basics. I'm going to talk for a second and then just get moving. But basically, what my plan is going to be today is going to be more of probably more talking than any of the other videos will have, just to make sure that I'm kind of explaining things ahead of time so that then you can kind of feel more comfortable going into motions and just kind of knowing what you're going to be doing, because I know you're both pretty beginner. So if that's not necessarily the case and I'm just, telling you what you already know, then I apologize, but figured better safe than sorry. So basically, as far as kind of just beginning yoga practice goes, realistically, the first question I always kind of get is equipment. You aren't really going to need any equipment beyond a mat, a blanket, towel, any of that will work. You can just use the regular floor, but it's just harder on your knees. Like, the main reason that people just have a mat is just for not having hard ground underneath you. But other than that, it really doesn't serve a huge purpose. So if you don't have one, it's not a big deal. Another thing that you may find that you want is a strap. You can use a strap, you can use a belt, you can use a scarf, you can use a t-shirt. Really, the main reason for straps is kind of to get your body in the positions that your body's not going in, like getting them in the directions that your body's not going in. So like when somebody is doing I'm trying to even think of an example. I honestly can't even come up with a really good example right now. Kind of the biggest one that people tend to use straps for is kind of like hip rotation mobility, just being able to kind of do one of these numbers and starting to kind of learn shoulder rotation, mobility that way. It can also be good if, say, we're doing some kind of a reach for a body part. Like, so actually, here's an example. So if we're trying to do one of these and you can't reach your foot, well, that's where the strap comes in. Tie the strap around and lift. And so then even if you can't reach your foot's getting in the right direction. And so that's kind of what that would be for. So if there's any time that you really can't get a posture and you feel like a strap might be the way to get there, just tell me what posture it was. And I'll absolutely let you know if it's a strap that would be the best option for you or if it's even necessary. And then another thing that can be super duper helpful is like a block. You can buy these on Amazon. They're not very expensive, but really a book works too. Sometimes I've seen people use like cans of soup even, because especially if you are trying to go into, let's say, just like a runner's lunge. Some people cannot reach their hands to the ground. And if you can't reach your hands to the ground, sometimes that is anatomy in the way. So you kind of have to get that anatomy out of the way. And then you can kind of reach the floor. Other people just genuinely can't reach that. And so blocks help allow you to get your shoulders and your back in the right position, even if you're not able to actually touch the ground. So that's why like a book or something else can be really good. And the thing that is good about blocks is that they have 3 different levels. They've got shortest, medium, tallest. So depending on what you need, they've got like the different levels, which is good. But they're also not like a super necessity, but beginning off, sometimes it can help and it can be a little bit less painful. Another time that beginners sometimes like to use blocks is like even just like a butterfly. If that is too much pressure on your groin, putting blocks underneath both sides allows you to kind of hold the position for a lot longer without putting so much strain on your knees and on those groin muscles. So those are some of the kind of the main items that people use for yoga, just really super basic. And if that was something you already knew, then I apologize, but just kind of figured that would be good to go through. The other thing is just cleaning your mat. If you do use a mat, please clean it. A lot of folks just kind of let them go and get really mangy, and then that is a really great way to get like athlete's foot. Not fun. Don't do that. And so you can just use like regular like Windex or like some like Dawn dish soap and a like damp towel. But then there's also like yoga mat cleaners. I do a DIY one with just water, vinegar, and tea tree oil, because that can be really nice. I'm trying to think if there's anything else, but no. So I think those are the main ones. So we're gonna get started. Just looking at my watch to see what the time's gonna be. So in the beginning, what I'm going to do is like I said, I'm going to be talking a lot more. So this one might not be so restful and restorative. But then video 2 is going to be sun salutations. Video 3 is going to be standing postures and folds. And then video 4 is going to be back bends and twists. And so that way you're going to kind of get like the whole combination of just like different things that can come up during yoga classes themselves. Hopefully you'll learn a ton of different postures. But like I said earlier, if there's any postures that you really can't get into or you need better cueing on, just message me the specific postures and I can absolutely like break them down a bit more in like in a different video, or if we decide to do some more. So just to get started, let's just get started with our self-seated, just comfortably. Getting started, what you're going to want to do is just bring yourself to a comfortable posture. Slow yourself down. Even if you're feeling like the day is already getting away from you, now is your opportunity to just breathe and move and learn how to breathe and move together. Another thing that can be talked about in yoga classes is what we call breath linked movement. So I'm going to start with a couple breathing exercises that encourage that breath linked movement. And then that way you can kind of understand like where that's going. Realistically, if you hear me say inhale or exhale and you aren't doing that, you don't need to like abrupt stop your breath and just like switch it, but the goal is to do certain postures with an inhale and certain postures on the exhale. The reason for that is actually physiological. It's a neuromuscular issue. If you are inhaling on an opposite pose, you are not guaranteed to hurt yourself. You are just more likely to hurt yourself. There, for whatever reason, and I am not a scientist nor a nurse, so I don't really fully grasp it, but I get the basics. Really, it just comes down to making sure that your muscles are getting the oxygen that they need and that your body is being trained in the right way. One of the ways that it was explained to me one time was that there are certain postures that if you are back bending or forward folding on the opposing breath, it actually tightens that muscle versus releases that muscle. So that's potentially part of the reason why you could get injured. And it honestly, like when you learn that breath linked movement, it actually begins to get hard to do it wrong because it just becomes so natural. And really, I hurt myself all the time with my EDS. I'm constantly pulling something. So you can still get hurt even if you're doing all the right things. So just be mindful of your body. Even if you are starting somewhere, the next day you might be behind that, you might be way ahead of that, but that's okay. Just recognize where your body is this day and go with it. So again, kind of getting back into that seated posture, maybe start by wiggling back and forth, starting to get a little bit of movement in your spine, maybe shifting your weight from sit bone side to side, just kind of moving, slowing yourself down and feeling the ground where the mat touches your body, and maybe beginning to recognize where the skin is touching the air or where your clothing is touching your body. You might start noticing things, sensations that feel good. You might start noticing part of your clothing is itchy. It's totally fine to move those things around. But at the end of the day, this is also a practice in letting that stuff go. Those bodily sensations that we feel, even if it's a little twinge or a tickle, they tend to only last 10 or 20 seconds. So if you can hold out for 10 or 20 seconds, you might notice that it doesn't bother you anymore. And we're all girls here, and I think we're all friends at this point. So if, clothing gets a little funky, no one's here to judge you. So now starting with that breath linked movement, inhale, arms up. Exhale, hands to heart center. Inhale, hands up. Exhale, hands back to heart center. And 5 more times. Inhale, up. And exhale, down. And that can be as quick or as slow as you want it to be. And don't worry about counting. If you lose track of how many times you've done this, I'll move you along. And on your next exhale, just looking down at your fingertips, feel free to practice with your eyes closed or open. When your eyes are closed, it offers you more balance challenge. So if you are already balance challenged, you might want to keep your eyes open, but it can also feel nice when you're not struggling with your balance to just flutter your eyes shut a little bit. Kind of a soft gaze or a gentle gaze is what we call it, when your eyes aren't fully shut but you're just looking through your eyelashes. It kind of creates that dusky feeling in your mind, and it brings down your endocrine system a little bit. And so then what you're going to want to do is just continue breathing here. And if your eyes are closed or they're open, just remembering that you can shift that at any time. And then inhale, hands up. Exhale, drop your right hand down, reach through the fingertips of your left arm, and then bend over to the right. You don't want to crunch over to the side. You want to just bend over as you would if you were leaning against a wall. You don't want to lose that position. So as you're leaning, pull through the fingertips and your left fingers right to the corner of the room, like to the where the ceiling and the wall meet, and just reach for that corner. And then exhale, hands to heart center. Inhale, hands up. Exhale, left hand over, and imagining that wall's there again. You don't want to be leaning backwards. You don't want to be leaning too far forwards. And if you're not sure, lean up against a wall. But you don't want to compromise your spine too much. You almost only want to be as far over as you could lift that bottom hand. You don't need to lift that bottom hand, but that's the goal. You don't want to be crunched so far over that you're compromising your spine. And exhale, hands to heart center. Inhale, sweep arms up. And exhale, twist to the right. Drop your left hand to your right knee and your right hand back behind you. If you are able to touch the floor, great. If you find a book or a block, because you can't, that's also fine. If you're easily able to touch the ground, then what you want to do is you want to take your hand and turn your fingertips right towards your butt. You're basically going to kind of sit on your fingertips. If you can't do that yet, that's just an end goal. So that's just something to think about. And inhale, reach tall. Exhale, twist a little deeper. And breathe. And inhale, sweep arms up to sky. Exhale, hands to heart center. Inhale, sweep arms up. And exhale to the left. Drop your right hand to your left knee, and the left hand back behind you. Think almost as if you have a cord being pulled out the top of your head. So every time you breathe in, your cord is being pulled tight. And every time you exhale, stay with that lengthen, twist deeper. And if you can only turn a quarter of an inch or a foot, it's entirely fine. It's whatever your body needs right now. Inhale, sweep arms up. Exhale, hands to heart center. And just a note before we keep going, as far as yoga practice goes, you might feel some discomfort, but you never want to feel pain. Some postures will push you past what you're familiar with or what you're comfortable with, and that is okay, but you don't want to be pushing yourself to the point where you're getting shooting pains or you're feeling like that almost bruise feeling coming on. If you feel that at all, let up a little bit. If that's because you're twisting too deep or you've been in a posture for too long, back out a little bit or come out entirely. A safe posture is always going into a child's pose. You can always join a child's pose, and that's just when your knees are out at the corners of your mat, the edges of your mat, and your big toes come to touch behind you. And then just reach your fingers long and breathe here. especially if you're feeling really uncomfortable or that you're starting to get nauseous or pain that's not in the right spots, feel free to come out at any time. Don't feel like you have to push through it. And another note, just as far as the stretching portion goes, you want to feel, so I'm just going to use my thighs as a demo because, they're right here. So when you're stretching, you want to feel that in the meat of your muscle. You don't want to feel that at the connecting points of your muscles. If you, like, just say, are in a runner's lunge, you're down here and if you're feeling pulling in your hip or on your knee, back out. You're going too far. You want to feel that in the meat of that muscle. Same thing with arms, wherever it is, you want it to be in that center point. And so that can also be a really good guide for beginners to make sure that you are like pushing yourself in the right direction. If you start feeling things pulling at a joint, switch it up a little bit. So then continuing on, as we are seated, now walk your hands forward in front of you, crisscross your heels behind you, and we're going to arrive in a table. A table is one of the most common postures for yoga because it's a great beginner posture. There's a lot of wonderful things that it can do for core stability, core strength gaining, as well as it's a great learning point for a lot of different balancing postures, what have you. So this one's an incredibly common one. As far as alignment goes, what you're going to want is you are going to want your elbows underneath your elbow. This is your elbow. You're going to want your wrist underneath your elbow, underneath your shoulder. So you want that nice straight line. You'll see that I kind of cave in. That's because I'm hypermobile. So of course my muscles are all over the place. But so do as I say, not as I do. So you want this as straight as possible. And then same with the back. You want your knees underneath your hip. And especially where you two are together, you might be able to use each other as kind of guides, like just to check in on your posture. Or if you're doing this at home, use a mirror. I have a big mirror in the corner over there just to kind of make sure that every once in a while I'm checking in on my posture. Because even though I've been doing this for years, I still sometimes get like off kilter and then you can cause damage. So that's not worth it. So now that we're in this nice tabletop position, hopefully you're just breathing here and relax. And now what I'm going to have you do is just some gentle neck motion. So drop your chin on the exhale, lift your chin on the inhale. Exhale, inhale. And so that's starting us for a cat-cow. So now that you've got your neck a little bit more mobile, now let's add our backs. So when you're dropping into a cow pose, it's going to feel funny when you start doing this, but you want to exhale on the drop. So exhale, lift your head, tip your tailbone up and drop your belly. And then I think I said that wrong. You're going to inhale going down. I apologize. Sorry about that. So inhale going down and exhale. Arch your back like a hissing cat. So that's why we started with those neck motions. As you're dropping your chin, you want to exhale. And that'll come up in other postures too. And inhale, drop your belly, which is why it feels so funny. I always wanted to exhale doing this. That's why I said that the first time. And exhale, arch your back. Inhale, drop. And exhale, arch. When you're in that cat posture, you almost want to be pushing your shoulder blades away from you. And when you inhale and drop to the cow, imagine pulling those shoulder blades on the back body. And exhale, arch. Tuck that tailbone in. And neutral spine. So next, since we're just really getting started, really with beginning postures right now, another very common, it's not really a posture, it's more of a core strengthener. When you're in your table, reach your hand out long. So whichever arm you're starting with, I'm starting with left, lift your opposite leg. So left arm up, right leg back, and hold. And then drop your hand and knee. Opposite side, inhale up. and exhale down. Opposite side, inhale up. Exhale down. Inhale up. And exhale down. And so now we're going to build off of that one. So this is, again, it's a core strengthener. So a lot of yoga incorporates your core. There's a whole mess of stuff going on in this area that's really hard to tap into sometimes. So especially if they're muscles that you don't use on a regular basis. So it's really nice to be able to kind of break it down this way. So then now reaching your left arm up, right leg back. On your exhale, crunch your knee to your elbow. Look at your knee and your elbow where they meet, and exhale, reach long. I'm going to mess that up every time. Inhale, reach long. Exhale. It's so important. I'm going to mess it up, so I apologize. And inhale. Exhale, crunch. Inhale, reach. And 3 more. Inhale, crunch. Exhale, reach. 2 more. In and out. In and out. And then slowly and gently put your hand and leg back down. If you start noticing that you're caving in your shoulder, just take that second to press back up. You want to make sure that you've got nice alignment. You don't want to be caving that in. And again, if this is uncomfortable, feel free to drop into a child's. Reach your right arm and left leg out. Exhale, crunch together. Inhale, reach long. Exhale, crunch. And inhale, reach long. 3 more. Exhale, crunch. And out. In and out. In and out. Last one. And drop your hand and knee. And breathe in table for just a moment. And just to get off of your knees for a split second, bring those knees wide, toes to touch, and fall down to child's pose. For child's pose, the posture of your head really depends on your neck mobility and what you're feeling today. You can keep your chin down, but it can put a lot of tension on your cervical spine. So feel free to kind of lay on your nose or your forehead. That tends to be where people go. It just depends on what's best for you. It can also feel really nice to just roll your head back and forth and give yourself a little bit of a forehead massage. All right, and then leaning back up, tipping yourself back into a table. So now tuck your toes, and we're going to go into the most common or most likely known downward facing dog. So when you're in a tabletop position, you've got your wrist, elbows, shoulders, you've got your knee underneath your hips. So this means that this is the exact position that you're actually going to want to be in when you push up into a downward facing dog. That being said, you don't have to keep your hands and feet in these exact positions. If it doesn't feel right for you, you can change them. But it's a guide for where you're actually going to want to keep them. So hands, fingertips pointing out. You want your middle finger or your pointer finger facing forward and everything twisted out. You don't actually want your hands facing completely straight. You want them bowed out a little bit. It helps your wrists. So what you're going to want to do is your hands are where they were, tuck your toes under, and then lift your hips, lift your knees up off the ground, and straightening your legs, press backwards. So as you can see, I literally went straight from a table, which was the alignment was there, straight back to a downward facing dog. The end goal is to have your heels touch the ground, but if they do not touch the ground, you are in the rest of the world where that is very common. But you can pedal yourself out right here, bend your knees, and see if you can maybe stretch that heel one at a time closer to the mat. But again, if it doesn't touch, that is totally fine. It's just an end goal. It's something to work towards. It does not show sign of weakness or mastery anyway. It just is something to look forward to. And as you're here breathing in and out, don't forget to breathe. As you're in your downward facing dog, you want to press through all of your fingers and your palms. So really, it's almost as if you could picture your hands like, you might even be able to see it, but just almost pressing that blood right out of your fingertips. Like you might start noticing that you've got that like red knuckles, white fingers kind of thing going on, and that means you're doing it right. You just really want to make sure that you're pressing through your hands. If you're slipping forward or kind of like falling in that sense, it could be a position thing. It could also be a mat issue. So just let me know if that's going on. We can work on that. But so inhale, maybe lift a little forward, and exhale, press back. You almost want to feel the pressure being pushed right in that center of your back between your shoulder blades. If you want, you can take turns taking a hand and pressing it on that back to show where that pressure can go. So now that you've been in downward facing dog for probably a solid 2 minutes, let's drop our knees, fit toes together, and back into a child's pose. And breathe. And now walking your hands to the left-hand side, stay with those child pose legs, and drop your head down. If you'd like, you can put your right hand on top of your left, just to bring in that stretch a little further. You are going to want to feel that stretch in this side body. So you're going to feel it on the right side body most likely, and feel free to pull that right hip back if you're not feeling much of a stretch. And walk to the center, pull straight, and then walk to the right. And walk back to the center. I find it feels nice to prop yourself up on your fingers for a second and then shift your shoulder weight back and forth so that your chest and your head aren't touching the ground, but it gets what we call a shoulder rinse. It can feel really nice to kind of just stretch that out a little bit, get some mobility going, but it also is a good release. And exhale down. And inhale. And on your next inhale, walk your hands back up to a table. Tuck those toes under. Press your hips up and back and drive those hips up towards the sky. Inhale, reach your right leg long. And exhale, drop back to the mat. Inhale, left leg long. This is called a three-legged dog. And exhale down. As far as your eyes go, the goal is to you almost want to be, it depends on who you talk to, but for a downward facing dog, where you're going to be looking, essentially you're going to be looking at your navel, like you're aiming towards your navel. For me, I tend to be looking between my toes and my knee area. That tends to be where I'm actually looking, just because I have cervical spine damage from my car accident. Like I really can't crank my neck that far forward without it really bothering me. So I don't do that. But if you ask a lot of the gurus, that's what they'll say that you want to be looking right at your navel, which seems a little bit funny, but you don't want your head tipped back. So if you're more comfortable looking at your fingertips, go for it. If you're more comfortable looking at the bottom of your mat, that's fine. But really, you almost want to be looking backwards. And so now, three-legged dog on the right side. Inhale, lift your right leg. And so we're going to go to one of the next more popular postures, and that is a low lunge. So you're going to engage those core muscles, bring your knee into your nose, and step between your hands. If you cannot step between your hands and your foot lands here, just walk it forward. If you need to lift it and walk it forward, that's fine. If you can't get much of a stretch here because you're just not limber enough, you can keep yourself back. It's totally fine. The goal here, though, is that you want to have that lower lunge. So this is for balance. I'm going to lower my knee here. So you've got your ankle underneath your knee. You really don't want that shooting straight forward over your feet. You're not necessarily going to hurt yourself, but it's almost better to have yourself at a whatever the heck this angle is, not a right angle, but your aim is for a right angle, but you don't want to be shooting yourself over like way far forward. Another factor here is that you want your knee to be tracking to that outer edge. So instead of like your knee like falling in and caving into your hip, you want it falling out. And if anything, exaggerate that to start. And so with a low lunge, you can have like this is a low lunge, then there's the runner's lunge. And so now just step back to downward facing dog. I like to go back through the three-legged dog just to realign my hips, but that's just me. So inhale, left leg up, walk that left leg forward between your hands. This is absolutely a place where blocks can feel really good. If that's what you need, feel free to put your blocks down and just hold here. If you dropped that knee down on the other side while I was talking, then just drop that knee down just so you stretch both. And so on this side, you can see it a little bit better. I'm trying to like angle my mat so that you can see me at all angles. But so when it comes to the position here, I'm hyper flexible. So I'm able to shoot my legs straight back, and it looks a little bit more of like almost like a skater dancing. And so for most folks though, that's not where you're going to be. So for most folks, it's going to be just a series of 90-degree angles. So really it's going to be 90-degree angle to your knee, and then from your shin to your thigh, and then same thing here. And so if this is where you are, that's perfect. And if you're able, eventually you can start sliding that hip forward, but the goal is to keep your hips square to the front of the mat. And when I say square, I mean exactly that. Just you want them parallel to the front of the mat. You don't want to be having one of them cocked out to the side, because that's a great way to get a hip impingement, which is not a good feeling. And so I'm going to move these out of the way. Pressing through your palms, tuck that back leg under, lift that knee, and just breathe. And step that left leg back to a downward facing dog. If you did the three-legged dog on one side, go ahead and do it on the other. If you didn't, don't worry about it. And pedal out. Maybe drop back down to a child's pose if you're sweating and you're tired. And breathe. And inhale up. So this video is going to go a little bit long just because I'm going to go through a couple more postures just so that you kind of have the basics on those, and then we'll wrap up. So the next one is going to be just an extension of what we already did, but it's going to be a high lunge. So propping your ankles under, press up and back to that downward facing dog. Feel free to shuffle your weight a little bit if you need to move your hands or your feet around to feel more comfortable. And inhale, right leg up. Exhale, knee to nose, reach forward. So as you start to do more yoga, you may find that going into a runner's lunge or a variation of a runner's lunge as a warrior, really what you might notice is that sometimes people go from the floor and other times you go from standing. So today we're going to go from the floor, but if you're coming from the floor, this is an incredible balance challenge. So what I have found and what I have been taught is that if you flip your palms forward and inhale up, for some reason, it's magic and it helps with balance. I don't fully understand it, but it works. So inhale up, reach tall through your fingers. If you want to keep your arms just long and parallel, that's fine. If you want your fingertip, if you want yourself in a prayer hands, That's also fine. Neither is wrong. They're just a variation, depends on the school of yoga that you go to. And same thing, you want your knee tracking over your big toe. You want it parallel, you want your thigh more or less parallel to the ground. But again, if you need to bring in your stance, feel free to bring in that back leg or bring in that front leg, but just watching that knee. Your knee is the most important part of this. And so inhale, arms up. If that is getting exhausting or you don't enjoy having your arms up, keep your hands on your hips. It's also a great way to test if you are square. So then exhale down, step back to downward facing dog, and pedal out those legs. And then inhale, left leg long. Exhale, knee to nose. Bring your foot all the way through and flip those palms. Inhale, up. And as we're hanging out here, you're gonna feel that thigh firing up. So your quads are gonna be getting real worn. You might be getting a little bit shaky, but that is hopefully going to mean that you are just getting those thigh muscles raring and ready to go for whatever's coming next. So then inhale tall, maybe sink your heel back, maybe press back in your heel, check in on your feet and your toes. Where's that ankle? Is that ankle like not your ankle, but is your ankle feeling good? How's your ankle feeling? Because if that's starting to get some pain, you may need to shift. If you are finding that this balance is incredibly hard, what you might find is that it's easier. So this is what we call, like, being right on the bar. It's like a gymnastics pose. This is hard. So you can move your legs out to what we call being on railroad tracks. So the farther out your foot is, and the farther out it is, the more space you're taking up. So that might actually help for balance, especially in the beginning. Eventually, you might want to bring those in a little bit just for the sake of body alignment. But in the beginning, it's really just getting the postures in the first place. And exhale down. Inhale back. And back to downward facing dog. And so now we're just going to walk our feet forward. And hang forward. Crisscross elbows. Hang your head heavy. Shake your head no. Nod your head yes. And then release your arms and roll up slowly. And exhale when you reach the top. Inhale, arms all the way up. Exhale, forward fold. So as you're folding forward, you want to lead with your chest. You don't want to arch your back. You want to lead with your chest and fold forward. Inhale, halfway lift. A halfway lift can be anywhere between your fingertips touching the ground. It can be touching the tops of your feet. You can hold your shins. You can be up on your thighs. But what you don't want is to be pressing on your knees. So I tend to kind of level out around shin level. Inhale here and exhale, fold. And then bend your knees, drop your head, and roll up slowly. So one more quick posture before we start wrapping up for today. What we're going to do is inhale, arms up. Exhale, hands to heart center. And then breathing in and thinking about where you're stepping. This is going to be the standing variation for getting back into those lunges. And so, but we're going to end up going to a warrior two, because that's one of the more popular postures as well, and a very tricky one as far as footing goes. So then what you're going to do is you're just going to step your right foot back. And if you want to start in a lunge, feel free to start in the lunge. And what you're going to do is literally from your lunge, you are just going to drop your heel, twist your toes, and you want to make sure that your foot is parallel to the back of the mat. You want your foot on railroad track so that you're not tipping over. So if you have to, heel toe your foot out if that's easier for balance. Toes facing forward on the front, toes facing sidewards on the back, and then arms open and blossom out. So when you're here, your fingertips facing forward should be parallel to the ground. And I always check back to make sure that my back arm is straight and that you're pulling through the fingertips on both ends. And as far as this goes, This can be a big challenge because there's a lot going on here, but what you're also trying to do is just really keep your hips as stable as possible. You don't want to be cocking your hips out, you don't want to be falling forward. So some of that is just kind of finding the balance as best as you possibly can. And then exhale, windmill arms down, and step that right foot forward. Inhale, halfway lift. Exhale, fold. And inhale all the way up. Exhale, hands to heart center. Thinking about that left leg, move your weight into the right and step that left leg back. Starting again with that lunge, eventually you'll get to the point where you can just place your foot back into a warrior two and you'll be very confident in that. But for now, just to get the placement, once your balance is okay here, you might need to get yourself on those railroad tracks, but hands at heart center. Peel that left foot back so that your heel's down. And even though I've been doing this for years, I always check my alignment on this one because it's really easy to just mess it up. So then blossom arms up and out. Check that back arm, check that front arm, and then make sure that that knee's tracking outside to the pinky toe edge of your foot, and breathe. And exhale, windmill, arms down, pop up onto your toe, step forward, and roll slowly up. And as I roll up, what I like to do is I like to shrug my shoulders up to my ears and then drop them back on my backside body. For me, that's a good way to just reset for Tadasana. So one of the other postures that is very common is what we call mountain pose or perfect pose. So with mountain, it is very simple that you're standing, but there's actually a lot more going on here than you think. So when you're looking at your toes, you want your toes facing forward. You want to be pulling up with your thighs. So even though this is just standing, you're not just standing. You're pulling your thighs up. And so when you think about your hips, there is an anterior and posterior tilt. So you can do this right now. So anterior, tip your hips back, and posterior, kind of think, the way I think of it is Instagram butt or Papa butt. So you got your anterior tilt and then you've got your posterior tilt. So you want to find somewhere right in the middle. So straighten your legs back out if you were kind of testing those hips. So pulling up on those thighs. You almost want to be like pulling the skin off your kneecaps is what it's going to feel like. And then find that center point where you're not in an anterior or posterior tilt. You're just at a neutral one right here. And then tightening the muscles in your abdomen, pulling in that core. You want to think of your chest as pulled in a little bit, but your shoulders are still up and strong. And then recess your chin back just gently, maybe even just a ½ inch to an inch back, and keeping your palms facing forward. So even though you're just standing, you can feel all of these things going on right now. The top of your skull should feel flat to the ceiling, and all of these kind of visual cues can be kind of strange in the beginning, but the more you practice it and the more you work with your body, the more you'll figure out like, oh yeah, that's where that is in space. So inhale, arms up. Exhale, forward fold. Inhale, halfway lift. Exhale, fold. And stepping back to a table, crisscross your knees and your ankles behind you and come to a seat. So as you're sitting, legs out long in staff pose, pull the skin off of your tailbone basically, because you just want to have your bum as flat to the ground as possible. And you know, our butt has a lot of anatomy there, so you got to move it. So move that back. Inhale, arms up. And exhale, forward fold. Reach for your toes, reach for your shins. If all you can do comfortably is just hang out right here, then maybe just rock back and forth. Just to kind of get that expansion and to try to start wiggling around your hips a little bit. But really, the end goal is going to be going forward. And if eventually you can reach your toes, awesome. If you're a freak like me, maybe you can grab your hands behind your foot, who knows, and bow. And walking yourself back up, scoot your hips down a little bit so that you can lay down on your mat. And laying back, reach for your right knee, hug your right knee in. Right hand on right knee, left hand on left hip. Drop that knee open to the side. Inhale up, cross arms, and drop that right arm down. Left hand and right knee twist to the left and look right. And inhale up, give that knee a big hug and run your right leg long. Inhale, left knee in, give it a nice gentle squeeze, and then left hand on left knee, right hand on right hip, drop that knee out to the side. If your foot doesn't touch the ground, it doesn't need to, but if it does, that's fine, but your knee does not have to touch the ground. In fact, it's not too likely that you're going to get your knee all the way down super easily. If you can do it, then more power to you. And this is another place that if you have those blocks, if this is really uncomfortable, put a block underneath that knee and lift your knee up. Switch hands, drop that left arm long, and then roll to the right, looking over your left shoulder. And inhale, twist back, give that knee one more big hug. Reach for your right knee and hug both in. Maybe bring your forehead to your knees or your nose to your knees. And then run your legs down long, pointing your ankles to the corners of the mat. Let your toes just splay out to the side, fan out, and then laying your arms gently to your side. Placing your palms up is a symbol of receiving, and placing your palms down is a symbol of receiving. Wait, I did that backwards. So you are receiving if your palms are up, and you are grounding if your palms are down. Sorry about that. And sometimes it can feel nice to just have one hand up, one hand down. It does not matter what way you end. It's entirely up to you. And sometimes just the way that your body's feeling might just kind of tell you how to do that. And so for now, what you're going to do is this is going to be what we call Shavasana or corpse pose. So the end of any yoga practice or traditional yoga practice will end with a Shavasana when you're laying in stillness. And breathe. As you're breathing, try to push away any thoughts. Try to push away those to-do lists and focus on bringing yourself into your body, bringing your attention inward. And as you breathe, maybe noticing how your body feels. You might notice that there's heat still building, or because we've stopped moving, you might notice that you're beginning to cool off and become colder. It can feel nice if you have a blanket or a big sweater to cover yourself with a blanket or put socks on, especially where you've been doing a lot of heat building and possibly sweating. You can get very cold in Shavasana, so it is worth having a blanket or just putting on an extra layer of clothing to feel more comfortable. But just keep breathing. If a thought comes into mind, recognize it and let it go.
And now beginning to wiggle your fingers and your toes, starting with very gentle movements, maybe blinking your eyes open once or twice, and returning to a more natural, deeper breath. And then when you're ready, begin to roll over to one side or the other. Oftentimes you'll hear it cued to turn to the right, but you can turn either direction. Pause for one gentle breath with your forehead down on the mat. And then very gently, and trying to use as much upper body strength as you can versus spinal strength, press up into a seated position. Cross your legs and hands on knees and breathe. You can keep your eyes closed or you can begin to open them. On your next inhale, inhale hands to heart center. Bow and look to your fingertips or in the direction of your fingertips if your eyes are closed. And maybe take a moment to thank yourself for building in this time today for movement and personal growth and well-being. Thank your body for allowing you to move through all of these postures, and your mind for staying focused or trying to stay focused. The light in me humbly and gracefully bows to the light in you. Namaste. Thank you for joining me for video 1. So just a couple little things I forgot to mention. As far as Shavasana goes, typically that is with eyes closed. If you are not comfortable with that, then you do not need to close your eyes, but typically it's with your eyes closed. Most people love Shavasana just because it's just that gentle release. Other people really hate it because their mind tries to wander so far. I personally tend to go through guided meditations for my Shavasana. I didn't this time because I've gone about an hour, and I know you said like half hour, 45 minutes, so I didn't do the guided meditation, but I will for the next couple videos. If you don't like that, then just let me know and I won't do that in the future, but that just tends to be my thing. I enjoy it and I tend to get good reviews on it. Another thing is that, of course, there's no music. I didn't play any music, mostly just because I wanted to cut out any chaos. And especially if I messed something up and needed to like clip the video, I didn't want to be messing with music. So feel free to listen to whatever music you want to. Traditionally, what you'll hear is just something super non-vocal, just music, like nature sounds, things like that. My favorite place to look for music is just like, I just do Pandora or like one of those apps like Spotify, whatever those apps are. You can look up just yoga, meditative music, and there are playlists for days. Just find one that you like, go for it. Play heavy metal for all I care. It's whatever makes you feel good. And really, it can just be whatever's going to be good for you in that day. If you want to just listen to silence and just hear me talking, then go for that. But I didn't play any music just because I didn't want to get it overcomplicated. And then you guys can choose whatever you want going forward. Another thing is that as far as the end goes, like the Shavasana, how I was mentioning, like a blanket or socks, things like that, that is purely just based on whatever you feel like you need. I am a cold body. I didn't do anything today just because I just kind of wanted to get these taken care of. I didn't really want to be worrying too much about clothing, but my feet get so cold during Shavasana that it almost gets hard to focus sometimes. So I always carry like some wool socks or something comfy to just throw on for Shavasana. And like, I'll just have like a sweatshirt that I'll just put on or something just to kind of like keep that heat in, just keep your muscles nice and loose so that you don't accidentally twist or pull anything. So then there was one more thing I wanted to add. I can't remember it. If I think of it, I'll add it to the next video. It was Shavasana related, but I can't remember exactly what it was. But so really, I hope that you enjoyed today. This one went a little bit long. I'm going to keep the rest of them a bit shorter, half hour, 45 minutes. But because there was a lot of talking today, figured I'd kind of give you a good like run through of all the things. Oh, that's what it was. So as far as the end of like when you are wrapping up, so the whole practice of just ending your practice is your own. You will see different practitioners, you'll see different teachers do them in very different ways. I tend to end, what I do is I find myself in a comfortable seated position. Since I've been sitting for so long, I'm just going to switch ankles here. What I do is I will just kind of hands at heart center, namaste being just a general greeting, just the light in me sees the light in you. It's a very beautiful, like the deep meaning is really beautiful. But you might have noticed my end is a bit ritualistic. It's not something that you need to do, but if it felt good and you did it, feel free to follow along. But that's just how I end. So when I say namaste, it is a greeting and a blessing and a genuine thank you to the universe and anybody that is joining me through this practice or anybody I'm going to see. So for me, after a namaste, I bow to my hands, to bow to myself and my heart space. And then I raise my palm, like the thumb edge to my forehead. And this is a blessing to the universe. So I'm thanking myself, I'm thanking the universe, and then I'm giving it out to the world. And bowing down is just regrounding and just sending all of the joy and anything that I have received during my practice just outward. So that's just something that I picked up on over the years because several of my teachers did it, and I just found it was just a really beautiful meaning. Feel free to do that. You'll notice that I do that. If you don't, just feel free to just at the end, namaste, bow, and just move on with your day. But if you did kind of like that, it gives you one more little forward fold. But I also just like to believe that it is sending out good vibes to the universe, and I believe and genuinely hope that that is true. So thank you again for joining me. Namaste. And I can't wait to make the rest of these videos. I hope you enjoyed them. And if you have any questions, comments, what have you, just message me. I look forward to hearing what you think. Bye.